So last week we were discussing in Perek Daled the first of 5 questions. And last week, the question that was raised was seemingly a very innocuous question. Which is greater, the soul or her garments? That seems like a joke. What do you mean, what's greater, you or your clothing? That's a silly question. But we said, no, actually, the garments have an advantage over the soul. How do the garments have an advantage over the soul? Soul is a chelek elokami mal mamish, a piece from God, separated, distinct, independent, and therefore not the same as being absolutely one with God. But Torah never leaves her origin point. Torah never leaves her identity as being one with God. Torah does not have a separate existence. Torah is God's will and wisdom. As we learned in chapter 2 of Tanya, God and his will and wisdom are absolutely one. So if Torah is the will and wisdom, and God is absolutely one with his will and wisdom, God is absolutely one with Torah. So there's no separation between God and Torah. Is there a separation between God and the soul? A certain sense of identity creates the separation. It's very, very slight. But as we will learn in quite a while, we get to chapter 35 of Tanya, even that slight sense of identity is a very critical factor, because we need complete nullification of self to be, in the language of the metaphor, which we actually just read in this morning's Tanya, concluding the entire first section of Tanya, I guess in honor of Shavuos, I'm sure is the timing, we reference the metaphor of the Yanuka, of the child of Zohar, who we learn at length in chapter 35. And the Yanuka, the child of the Zohar, creates this concept, this vision of oil. And the oil has a wick in it. And the wick contains on it a flame. The flame stays down here because of that wick constantly fed by that pot of oil. So the oil goes through the wick to feed the flame. As the oil is subsumed in the flame, the oil becomes flame, right? You eat food to energize, to have calories, to exist, and the food becomes you. If you digest it properly, there's not, oh, that's a carrot, oh, that's a cookie. No, it's you. It's part of your body. So the oil becomes the flame. And as long as there's oil in that pot, as long as the wick still has oil, the oil is constantly feeding the flame, and the flame is anchored on that wick. And the flame represents God, the presence of God. On the wick, the body of man, the body of the Jew. And what is keeping this flame anchored onto the body of the Jew? The oil, the mitzvahs, the service of God. And we could say the oil is the mitzvahs. Why isn't the soul the oil? What is more godly in this world than the soul? The energy of the soul should be the oil that feeds the flame and maintains the flame on the wick, maintains God on the body of man. And in chapter 35, we learn no, because the soul has an existence. It has an identity. As we're saying, its essence definition is chelek elokami mal mamish, a piece, one, but separated from God's essence and being. And because it's a chelek, because it's a piece, because it has this very slight existence, identity, sense of self, it can never be the oil. Because the oil becomes the flame. The oil is completely subsumed. The oil has no separate identity. So what can be the oil? The mitzvahs. Because Torah and her commandments, they have no existence but being God's will and wisdom. They're completely one with that flame. So they can completely become part of that flame. So even the slightest hair's breadth of an existence means you can't be subsumed at all. It's like literally an all or nothing situation. You have complete nullification, no sense of existence, and can become completely part of the flame of God, or you have even the tiniest shred of existence, and you can't be subsumed at all. But the good news is the soul can get dressed in her garments, the Torah and her commandments. And when the soul is dressed in those garments, she ascends to that level of being that one with God. like we pointed out last week, the Rebbe, the last part we read, the Rebbe proving this point, the oneness of Torah with God, quotes Maimonides, Hu Yodea Humad Hamada. And we said, wait a minute, we've had this quote before. We had this quote in chapter 2. And in chapter 2, the quote was proving oneness of the soul with God. And here, this quote is proving the greater oneness of Torah with God. So, like, what are you doing? And we actually notice a tiny change in the quote, seemingly not significant, but nothing is random here in Tanya. A switching of the order of the quotation to highlight this idea that, yes, of course, the soul is one with God, but Torah is more one with God. So Maimonides said, Hu Amada, Hu Yodea, Hu Yadua. God is the faculty of knowledge. God is the one who knows. God is the subject that is known. So in other words, God and his wisdom are one, unlike how we operate. And therefore, the soul, which emerges from the thoughts of God, from the highest level of the highest world, seminal wisdom of the world of being, is absolutely one with God. Now we're saying Torah, God's will and wisdom, is absolutely one with him. As we see, God is the wisdom, God is the knower, God is the faculty of knowledge. God and his wisdom are one, Torah is God's wisdom, so Torah and God are one. So make up your mind, because here we're proving Torah is more one than the soul, but we use the same quote to prove the soul's oneness with God. So what is the change the Alter Rebbe made? In chapter 2, the Alter Rebbe says, Hu Hamada. God is the ability to know, like we'll call our brain. Hu HaYodea, he is the knower. Hu HaYadua, he is the material that is being known. He is the faculty of thought and the knower and the knowledge. By him, it's all one. It does not work that way by us. Here, when I'm using the same quote, and I want to prove Torah's oneness even more than the soul's oneness, that I use this quote to prove the soul's oneness, the Alter Rebbe switches the quote slightly. He changes the order. He says, Hu HaYodea, he is the knower. Hu Hamada Hu Yadua, he is the ability to know, he is that which is known. This slight change by the soul in chapter 2 to prove the oneness of the soul, I start with Hu Hamada, the ability to know, and then I move to the knower. So of course, by God, it's all one, but by us, the ability to know, like we would call it our brain, is not exactly me, though it's very close. But by Torah, I start with Hu HaYodea. He is the one who knows. That's him. Oh, in my small brain, that means this is it. This is the knower. This is the person. This is the thing itself. So by Torah, Hu HaYodea, Torah is God the knower. And by the soul, Torah is the ability to know, the knower, the knowledge. It's all one by God. And part of this whole package deal is the soul itself. So that slight difference is really expressing this very deep point that Torah has an even greater oneness with God than the oneness of the soul, which is beneficial because now whenever we study Torah, whenever we do a commandment, we're ascending to that degree of oneness. That was the first question answer, so to speak, if I want to create an external structure here of the 5. Going on, we're on the top line of the next page. And even though God is called limitless, and to his greatness there's no inquiry, we can never figure out if we tried, and no thought grasps God at all, and so too with his will and wisdom, as is written, there's no investigating his understanding. And it's written, if you search for God, you'll find. So all of that, even you might have heard the question mark at the end, is the question. That was the question, as I'm saying, the second of the series of 5. The question the Rebbe is asking is, we are trying to grasp God. We just said the advantage of Torah and her commandments being even more one than we are is because then when the soul is dressed in Torah and her commandments, the garments, the clothing, which we're wearing when we study Torah, like right now, or do a mitzvah, like right now, because we're doing the mitzvah of Torah study, we ascend to have that degree of oneness. We're grasping God on the level of Torah and the commandments, because we're within those garments and we're within that degree of oneness. And that says, wait a minute, how is this possible? I'm limited, I'm finite, I'm creation. How can I grasp the ungraspable creator? How can finite me grasp infinite God? And the Rebbe the Rebbe is very thorough. So the Alter Rebbe just brought 6 proofs to prove that this doesn't make any sense. Impossible, right? God is called Ein Sof. He's limitless. You're limited. He's limitless. Limitless cannot be grasped by limited. We can never understand his greatness. We can't grasp him at all. We're trying to grasp him. Impossible. Not only can we not grasp him, we can't grasp his will. We can't grasp his wisdom. The Rebbe brings 2 more quotes to prove this. So there's 6 quotes or proofs or facts, all proving this is impossible, right? My thoughts are not your thoughts. Again and again and again. Impossible, cannot be done. You will never understand God. You will never grasp God. God is infinite. You're finite. God's incomprehensible. Done. But we're saying we can't. And we're saying we do. So we know all of this is true. It all is true. It all is Torah. But we also know that we do grasp God. We do. We're finite. He's infinite. Our minds can't possibly understand him. Impossible. But we do grasp him. How? So the Rebbe, after giving us these 6 statements, facts, quotations to prove that you can never do it, gives us another saying of our sages to explain how we do. What's the saying? So continuing, Hine alze amru. So on this, our sages said, this ability of finite to grasp and be one with infinity, b'makom she'ata motze gedulaso shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, sham ata motze anvus nuso. In the place where you find the greatness of God, there you find his humility. Now, the simple meaning of the sages has nothing to do with what we're talking about. They're talking, or you see textually, God being one with the unfortunates. That's not what we're talking about. But guess what? When the sages say something, there's levels and levels of meaning in their word, levels and levels of depth, just as there's levels and levels of depth in Torah itself, right? Many of us might know the expression of the sages. There's 70 ways of understanding every aspect of Torah, 70 different dimensions. So similarly, the sages, when they're saying their words that become part of Torah from the Talmud, there's levels of meaning. So beyond the simple meaning, they're explaining textually God's name found with the unfortunates. You find his greatness in his humility of being placed in proximity with the unfortunates, the widows and the orphans. The Rebbe is saying there's also something very deep our sages are saying here. The way we're getting the greatness of God is through his humility in squashing himself, in constricting himself, in contracting, in making himself very, very small. We began the question of this second question answer by the Rebbe giving 6 quotes and facts to prove that we can't possibly grasp God, that God's infinite, impossible, ungraspable, unfathomable. All of those quotes are true. He is, but he desires a relationship with us. Obviously, hopefully, we desire a relationship with God. We want God. We want to be one with God. We want to contain God. We want to be contained by God. We want God. Well, far more than we want God, God wants us. You know, he's the parent, we're the child. He wants us. So because he's infinite and ungraspable and unfathomable, we could never be one. He's too big and we're too small. But he wants us. He loves us. He needs us. And therefore, he squashed himself to become small enough that we can grasp the ungraspable God. That God and I can be one. Impossible, but true. Where did God squash himself into? Into Torah and her commandments. God put himself in there. So when I'm learning the Torah or doing the commandment, we're one. Because he's squashed, constricted, contained within this Torah, within these commandments. Why would he do that to himself? Because he really loves us and he really wants a relationship. And he's sacrificing himself. He's squashing himself. He's putting himself, so to speak, on the side to have this relationship with us. Much, much later in Tanya, not in the whole first section at all, much, much later in Tanya, towards the end, the Alter Rebbe explores this concept from a different, deeper angle with more detail and really says, if this is what God's doing for you, surely you should do the same for God. If God is putting himself on the side and squashing himself and constricting himself because he wants a relationship with us, we should put ourselves on the side and strip away any of our other passions, other things we put ourselves into to have this relationship with God. So what do we mean by this? So the Rebbe says, right, we had the quote, so in the place of his greatness, that is his humility in constricting himself to have this relationship with us. And now the Alter Rebbe explains, so God constricted his will and his wisdom, in, first thing the Rebbe tells us, the 613 commandments of the Torah. And in their laws, all the laws of Torah. Tanakh. And in literally the formation of letters, of words, of verses, of Tanakh, of scriptures, of the 24 books of the written Torah. And in all the ways that Torah is explained. So God took himself and he put himself in Torah, meaning in every letter of Torah, in its core, that's God. In every law in Torah, in its core, that's God. In every explanation of a verse of Torah, that's God. In every detail of a commandment, that's God. So you can say, what am I saying? Like, I mean, are we adding something I don't know already? What does this mean? What this means is, to sort of like twist this a little bit to understand the point the Rebbe is making, people would think, oh, it's really good to learn Torah. Why is it good to learn Torah? I mean, this is actually very appropriate. Hey, Shavuos is coming up, Friday, Saturday. So yeah, we want to learn Torah. Why is it important to learn Torah? So you could tell me to know what to do. You learn Torah to know how God wants you to live. That is true. To absorb the ethics and morals and values. That is true. There's a lot of ethics, morals, and values in Torah, and many other things. The Alter Rebbe is saying, you know the core reason why you learn Torah? You learn Torah to get God. That's what he's saying. Yes, Torah is brilliant. Learn Torah and you'll also become brilliant. Less Torah is a depth of knowledge. Learn Torah and acquire as much as you can of that infinite sea of knowledge. It's fascinating. It's elucidating. It's mind-stretching. It is. No, I'm not doing it for any of those reasons. Okay, I'm a Jew. I'm a simple Jew. I want to know how to serve God. That's why I'm doing it. Good, but no. Alter Rebbe says, you're learning Torah. And not only learning Torah, you're doing Torah. You're fulfilling the commandments of Torah. The essence reason is because that's where God is. God is in Torah. God is in the commandments. Every time you learn Torah, besides being inspired, besides knowing what to do, besides gaining the wisdom, besides absorbing the morals and the ethics and the values, besides understanding what a Jew is and where we come from and where we're going, bigger than any of those very important, beautiful things, you are getting God. Because God squashed himself into the Torah. So if a Jew wants God, he goes and learns Torah. And he gets God in that Torah he's learning. And if a Jew wants God, he does a commandment. Because God put himself in every one of the commandments. So when you do the commandment, you're fulfilling the will of God. You're adding checks to your chart. You're transforming the physicality of this world. You're bringing godliness in. You're refining the physical up. You're making the world ready for Mashiach. You're doing loads and loads of good things. And the Rebbe says, you are getting God, because God is in those commandments, in those details, in the precision of halacha, of Jewish law. There you find God. So I just think it's amazing timing, because no, I didn't plan this. But it is Tuesday night. We are within the 3 days of prep for Shavuos. Shavuos is literally 2 nights away. Yes, 2 nights away. And what's Shavuos about? It's a celebration of us becoming God's people, of us getting the Torah. Getting the Torah, we became God's people, is of us getting the Torah. Torah, the blueprint of the world, Torah that preceded the world, Torah is given to us. And now we say, and why is that so amazing? Because when God gave us the Torah, he gave us himself. We see this embedded in the first word of the 10 commandments. Very, very important to go to synagogue on Friday to receive those commandments in person, to hear them. So the first word in Hebrew is anoichi. Anoichi is I. Not usually how you say I in Hebrew. In Hebrew, you say I, ani. Some commentators actually say anoichi is Egyptian. Others say it's just a very fancy word for I. Our sages say anoichi is an acrostic for 4 Hebrew, well, actually 4 Aramaic words. Ana, nafshi, kisavis, yahavis, which means I put myself in the writings. God is saying, anoichi, I put myself in the writings. I'm giving you my Torah. I'm giving you me. And how do you get me? Open up a book and learn. Do a commandment. You get me. So that is exactly the point the Alter Rebbe is making here, which to you might be like, oh, I knew this since I was in preschool. That just means the concepts of Tanya have so trickled the world, they reached your preschool. But this is literally the point the Alter Rebbe is making exactly here, exactly where we're holding in Tanya, that when God gave us the Torah, he gave us himself. And that is so we can be one with him. Because God absolutely loves us and absolutely wants that relationship. And how can finite and infinite fuse? Only as he is allowing, only where he puts himself. Meaning there's many people in this world that are striving for spirituality, and they go into caves, go to India, try to levitate themselves. They try to become spiritual. Spirituality has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Nothing to do with what we're talking about. There's many laws in Judaism that might not feel spiritual at all. There are many that might, and there's many that might not. And it does make a difference, because it's not about spirituality. It's about getting God. And God is within every letter of Torah and every detail of every commandment, including the ones that might seem to be just literally dealing with the most mundane details of this world. You put on your right shoe first, and then your left shoe, and you tie your left shoe, and then you tie your right shoe. I don't know if that feels very spiritual, but you're getting God, because God's in the law. It's a wonderful time to rewire your thinking of not, I want to learn Torah to know what to do. That's true too. Not, I want to learn Torah to get inspired. That's true too. I want to learn Torah to get God. That's the point the Rebbe is saying here. But all the other things work as well. And yes, we learn Torah and know what to do. And yes, we learn Torah and get inspired. And yes, we learn Torah and we're perfumed with the wisdom, with the brilliance, with the ethics and morals and values, with the depth, with Jewish identity. All of that happens as well. But the most important thing is we're learning Torah, we're getting God. And that's really the point the Rebbe is making here. So why did God do all this? Bichdei, in order. Shekol haneshama, that every soul, a ruach v'nefesh, and not even neshama, meaning like the entirety of soul, but actually as level 3. If you remember, we have 5 levels of soul: nefesh, ruach, neshama, and then chay and yechida that are beyond our body. So nefesh is the lowest level in our liver. Ruach is a higher level emotion, speech, in our heart. Neshama is the intellectual level, the highest of the three in our minds. So it's not just neshama, the intellectual aspect of soul, the highest of those three, the most godly, refined part, the most naturally a vehicle to intellect, even ruach in our heart, speech, emotion, even nefesh in our liver, action. Also, they get God. Also, they are becoming one with God as we learn and do and contain God as he put himself in the Torah commandments. The Rebbe is saying, Bichtei, this is the reason. The reason God squashed himself is at every level of soul, Shebegufa Adam, not a soul flying out there in some high spiritual realm. Planet Earth, in the body of a man, Tuchal Lahasigam B'da'ata, should be able to grasp them in her intellectual mind, the human mind, how small our minds are, right? We use such a small percentage of our brain cells. Probably by Mashiach, we'll use a lot more and be a lot more brilliant. But right now, our minds are small. Our minds don't grasp much, but God made himself small enough to be graspable. Ulekaiman, and to fulfill them. However much it's possible to fulfill them in action. Some things, of course, you can't fulfill in action because we can't do them today in speech and learning about it and discussing it in machshava and thinking about it. And through this, all of the 10 aspects of soul on each of these levels of soul, the 10 aspects of nefesh and the 10 aspects of ruach and the 10 aspects of neshama, all of them will be completely engarbed in God through these garments. But just to cap this point, to recap it, we wondered, the Rebbe is saying, soul is smaller than garment because through garment we become one with God, we contain God, God contains us. How is that possible? He's God. I'm small. I'm a soul in a body. I'm a human right now. I'm small. And the Rebbe says, you're right, you're small. But God made himself small. God made himself so small that he squashed himself into Torah and the commandments in order. He did this for this one reason, because he loves you so much, in order that you and he become one. So can I grasp the ungraspable God? Yes, you can. How is that possible? Because he made it possible. Because he so much desires that connection to you. So this flows into our next question, which is, so we're saying this whole thing is God constricting himself, right? Yeah. God's infinite. There's a finite physical world. God squashes himself, constricts himself in Torah and the commandments. So we, finite us, can grasp infinite him. So am I really getting him? This is the third question. Is it really him? Meaning, he's infinite, I'm finite. He puts himself in the letters and words and verses of Torah, in the commandments, in the laws of the commandments, in the details of the laws of the commandments. Is that really him? Or is it a watered down, diluted version? Like, could it really be him? Could he really get that small? And the Rebbe's answer is, it is. It is. It's really him. I remember when I taught this once, many years ago, by understanding the example the student gave, you can understand how many years ago it was. A student gave what I thought was a brilliant example of this. She compared it. She said, like, if a person goes to a movie theater, do movie theaters still exist today? I think they do. If they go to a movie theater, there's this massive screen, and they're watching the movie. Now, if instead of a movie theater, you were at home in front of a TV set, you'd be watching the same movie. Everything would be the same. It's not like you lost some of the features, or some of the color is different, or they didn't give you the music. It's the same movie. It's just on a much smaller screen. Now, of course, nowadays, we wouldn't say a TV screen. We would say a cell phone. You can envision a cell phone, right? You have a movie theater size screen. You have a cell phone. But on that cell phone, people watch movies. And it's the same movie. It's a much smaller screen, but it's the same movie. I did not make up that metaphor. One of my students did, but it has stuck with me for all these years because I thought it was so brilliant in terms of this exact concept. God's infinite. And he gets himself into a letter of a verse. Yeah, well, that can't be the real thing, because, I mean, how could the real thing get into a letter? No, it is. It is. It's the same thing, just so constricted. You're learning the laws, you're learning the details, learning detailed concepts of the sacrifices and all the details of how they slaughtered the animal and what parts they took off the body first. And it's like, this is spirituality. It doesn't feel spiritual at all. It's not anything about spirituality. It's about God. God's within every detail of every law. When you're learning those laws of the sacrifices, I'm never going to do that. When there's a temple, I'll never be doing that. I'm never going to be cutting up that animal and taking out these parts of his body. But there's a certain part of God I only get when I study those laws, because God put himself in those laws, in every single one. So that is a very significant point the Rebbe is raising here, which I think is so wonderful that we're learning it now, because when we go into Shavuos and we receive for time 3,338, when we receive that Torah, it's from a deeper level of God than ever before. And we're receiving it from a deeper level than ever before. And maybe we can remember this concept. And as we receive the Torah, understand this is the hug. This is the embrace. And I embrace God, and God embraces me every time I choose to learn. And that's the unbelievable humility of God, the Rebbe is saying. It's interesting to think of the word humble with God. The humility of God. What's the humility of God? In making himself small. In making himself small enough to fit into a letter, to fit into a word, to fit into a verse, to fit into a law, to fit into a detail of a law. That's major humble, major smallness. But he did it out of love for us, out of a desire to connect to us.